Week 15 will officially be over the halfway point of the fantasy hockey season, so we have to make sure that we are dialing things in when it comes to our teams. But that being said, that doesn't mean that there's nothing going on around the National Hockey League. Players are continuously going on these hot streaks, but we want to find players that are sustainable to add on our team. So I've got 7 players for you guys that you absolutely must add to your team before week 15 of fantasy hockey. Let's get right into the video. All right, guys, starting us off, we have Logan Couture, 36% owned. He is expected to be on the upcoming road trip for the San Jose Sharks. Last year, he's just, you can see that he's just a very consistent, great categories player. 27 goals, 40 assists, 20 power play points, 198 shots, 70 blocks, and 128 hits. Great category coverage across the board. We love players like this that hit multiple categories. Only 36% owned right now. The timeline on his return is still kind of vague, even though he is expected to be on the upcoming road trip for the Sharks. He'll slot into that line 1 power play 1 role. I just think it's a great option right now if you pick him up and stash him on your team, regardless of whatever league you're in. I think this is a good player to kind of hold on to and stash. You can end up dropping him if he, for whatever reason, just implodes, or if he ends up being the great categories player that he has been consistently over the past couple seasons. I highly recommend just having that guy on your team available. You can sell on that guy. You can just hold him and use him, especially if you're kind of struggling right now in terms of forwards. I know centers are kind of deep to begin with, but again, having a player like this available to you to either trade or to just have on your team long term and throughout the rest of the season is a great option. Make sure you either add and stash Couture or pick him up if he's available. Up next, we have Troy Terry of the Anaheim Ducks, 35% owned. He's got 4 points in his last 3 games since returning from his injury and 8 points in his prior 10 games before that injury. He's playing line 2 power play 1 currently, over 18 minutes average time on ice in each of his last 3 games played. This extends a little bit further back to, again, prior to his injury as well, but just wanted to highlight his most recent games because he has gotten a slight bump, and that's probably due to Trevor Zegras going down. This guy's going to be looked upon as one of the main play drivers for the Ducks. He's got good shot volume. He's around that 8.1 shots per 60, and he's shown that over the course of the past couple seasons. I took his average shooting percentage from the last 2 seasons and compared it to this season. The reason why I went with the last 2 seasons is because that's when we really saw Troy Terry establish himself as the player that he is currently in the National Hockey League, and the 3 prior years he played under 50 games. So I wanted to take that kind of 2-year average and kind of compare it to where he's at right now. He is shooting less than 5% from that average. He had 1 year where he was around that 10% mark, and I expect that to kind of come up a little bit with the increase in time on ice that he's getting and the role that he's going to play going forward for the Ducks. Just because he's on Anaheim doesn't mean that he's going to be bad. As you can see, based off of the sample that I've provided in his last 10 games and his 3 games prior to his injury, he's been great in terms of his production, and if he continues to produce, he'll get you some good value there, along with some decent shot volume on top of that. In terms of hits and blocks, he's not really a great peripherals guy, but he should have a ton of point upside going forward, especially in the second half of the season. Highly recommend you grab Troy Terry if you need some added scoring to your lineup, and he should be a great option going forward in the second half of fantasy hockey season. I'm a little bit early on this one. Jamie Drysdale, 33% owned. The reason why I'm including him in this must-add video when he's got 0 sample size outside of 1 game in Philadelphia is simply the fact that it's very hard to find defensemen with upside this late in the season. A lot of guys are already kind of established and their roles don't really change throughout the year unless there's a major injury, for example. The only one that I could really think of that's really had that kind of an impact would be Brock Faber. Again, you see a guy that's, a young, talented player, plays a ton of minutes consistently, and then you get a couple injuries happen, and you end up skyrocketing onto power play 1 and becoming a very valuable rest of season defenseman. I think it's possible for Jamie Drysdale, especially based off of the game that we've seen. Again, he's not a great peripherals guy, so his value is going to be determined by his scoring upside, but he did see over 19 minutes time on ice, and John Tortorella, as bad as a coach he's been in terms of managing forwards and player management and stuff like that. I know any Owen Tippett owners out there are just as frustrated with him, but he has managed these kind of dynamic defensemen in the past. You look at Seth Jones, you look at Zach Werenski, for example, and I just don't think that you're going to have any type of competition for power play one. Like, who is he really going to play rest of season on power play one? Zamula or Drysdale? Like, let's be honest here, guys. The only circumstance I could see is if he stays power play two is because they move Sanheim back up to power play one, but I think they're going to see the upside that Drysdale provides, and sometimes players just get this like kind of buff going forward from being on a new team and being in a new environment and wanting to kind of prove themselves to, especially to a coach like Torts. So I think, again, I could be a little bit early on this. It's very determined on his scoring. Again, his peripherals are not great. His block volume is actually like pretty decent, but his shot volume and hit volume are just not really too anything to kind of get excited about. But for Drysdale, I think there is a ton of upside for him going forward, and Philly's been great this season, especially if he lands on power play one. I think he's a great second half option, especially as a defenseman with some scoring upside. On to another Philadelphia Flyer, we have Joel Farabee, 33% owned. He's got 10 points in his last 10 games. I didn't realize this guy was so young. He's only 23 years old. I thought he was in his like mid to late 20s, but he is getting line one and power play one time now, over 19 minutes average time on ice in his last 5 games played. His shots per 60 are taking a massive jump from 6.2 to 8.3. It's looking like a big breakout season for Farabee so far. He's got great scoring and peripherals upside, especially in deeper leagues. I think this guy is definitely worth an add if he's available in your league. If he continues to see that top 6 role and line one of playing alongside Logan Couture and Travis Konechny, who's been absolutely lights out as of late as well. So shout out to you guys if you managed to grab Konechny this year. But I think going forward, Farabee is a great option, especially if he's playing line one and power play one. I don't know a lot about him from a prospect standpoint as much as I do other guys. Like I said, I was surprised to see how young he was at 23 years old. But I think going forward, if he's playing on that line one and getting power play one time as well, it should be a great option for you guys going into week 15 and further beyond in the fantasy hockey season. I'm still absolutely shocked Yegor Sharangovich is under 30% owned. He's got 17 points in his last 15 games, 11 goals in those 15 games as well, including a hat trick and 2 goals in the 2 previous games. He's a mainstay on line one and power play one, playing alongside Elias Lindholm and Jonathan Huberdeau. 1950 average time on ice in his last 10 games. This is, as you can see, guys, the sample is just a lot more extended with Sharangovich than other players. I think he's a great option. I understand he's shooting at 17.7% this year, but sometimes you just have to look at it in the sense that, you know, he's having a breakout year, he's having a good year, he's finding the back of the net. Just because his shooting percentage is a little bit above his career average, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to come down for the duration of the season. For right now, he's an absolute must add for me. His shots per 60 are even up slightly, which is great. You can even add this guy and sell high on him in a couple, probably you have to wait a couple weeks. I find a lot of the time, like when you instantly add somebody and try to trade them away, people are like, well, you just picked up a waiver player, which is understandable, but Sharangovich has been fantastic this year, especially as of late. So I highly recommend you guys add this guy. Like I said, you can sell high on him later on throughout the season if he continues his strong play, or just roster him on your team in general. He's been fantastic this year. Highly recommend grabbing him. Speaking of players that have been absolutely fantastic as of late, Jonathan Drouin has clicked in that line one, power play one role in Colorado. 14 points in his last 15 games. He's continuing to see over 20 minutes time on ice in each of his last 6 games. Drouin is just a great source of scoring right now, playing alongside Nathan McKinnon and Mikko Rantanen. He is a must add in deeper 12 plus team leagues. The peripherals aren't going to be there with a guy like Drouin. I kind of explained this in my buy, sell, hold video just the other day. So if you guys haven't looked at that video, be sure to check that out. I explained that Drouin is a sell high right now, but he's definitely rosterable on your team, especially in a deeper league if you manage to grab this guy. Very similar to Sharangovich. If he's continuing to play line one and power play one, he's absolutely warranted his ownership and should probably be over 30% owned. So if you don't have like the scoring that you need to kind of continue on throughout the season, I highly recommend grabbing Drouin. Even though like his peripherals aren't great, if he's continued to score and he's playing alongside McKinnon and Rantanen, this is exactly why we had him him listed as a deep league sleeper in the early season, preseason content that we had, just because we knew that if he ended up clicking on that top line, there was going to be a ton of upside for him going forward. And that seems to be the case going into the second half of the fantasy hockey season. So highly recommend you guys add Drouin if he's available in your league. Finishing up our list here, I wanted to give you guys a little bit of a deeper option. Jaden Schwartz is just coming back off of injury. He's got 3 points in his last 2 games since returning, and he had 15 points in 23 games prior to his injury. He's back on that middle 6, kind of top 6. I don't know with Seattle, man. It's always the same. Their second and third line and their first line even play a lot of the same amount of minutes. So to me, it's not a big concern that he could be on line 3 or could be on line 2 on paper. As long as he's getting that average time on ice of around that 16 to 18 minute mark, he's got a ton of upside. And then you add the fact that he's power play 1 as well. He should be a good second half scoring upside type player in deeper leagues, especially. He's got decent shot volume as well too. He hovers around that 8 shots per 60, and he's got a 4-game schedule next week. So if you want to add a guy that will give you some upside in scoring and some good shot volume going forward, he kind of chips in hits and blocks, but it's not really a crazy high amount. So I think going forward, Schwartz, especially being dual eligible center left wing, should be a great option for some of you in deeper leagues going forward. Highly recommend you add him for the rest of the fantasy hockey season if he continues to stay in that top 6 role and continues to produce. That will do it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Leave a like and hit that subscribe button if you enjoyed the content, as well as let me know in the comments down below who you think is an absolute must add before week 15. Definitely love hearing your guys' thoughts and comments in the comments down below. I love creating some discussion with you guys, so I'll look forward to that as well, as you guys always do on every single one of my videos. So thank you guys so much for all the support and everything lately. Have yourselves a fantastic rest of the day.